Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Super excited to have somebody on today that's calling in all the way from Miami, Florida today. Jane Serra, nice to have you on, Jane. Welcome.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you today. Hi, everyone.
Sure. So before we get started, I'm going to give a quick intro. So Jane is VP of Marketing at Justuno. She's also the founder and host of Women in B2B Marketing podcast, which we are definitely going to be speaking about a little bit after this, Jane. Just some of Jane's previous experience. Jane was also marketing director at Elite SEM, which was then known as, but now is Tinuiti. Jane is a marketing executive with 15 plus years of experience leading marketing teams across demand gen, branding, events, content, and comms. Good solid background in building out marketing teams across those companies that we just mentioned. She also has an MBA in marketing and international business, and she hopes one day to speak more than 1.5 languages. So tell me, so when you say 1.5 languages, Jane, what's the 0.5?
So funny. I'm Spanish, which is fitting now that I'm here in Miami, but it's been Spanish since my life in New York.
Okay. And is it really 0.5? Is it?
Yeah, and sadly it hasn't grown at all since coming to Miami. It's still 0.5. But my son, he's 3, and it's about 0.5 for him. So we're at the same level. Hopefully I'll get a little higher from his help.
That's awesome. How old is your son?
3.5.
Okay, so he's probably gone to school with people that speak fluent Spanish and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Multilingual.
We can have mini. Exactly. Soon he'll be trumping me and he'll be way ahead. My elementary Spanish will be nothing compared to him shortly.
So for what it's worth, I know the feeling. So I've got a 7-year-old, or she's not quite 7 yet, but she's turning 7 soon. And I live in Austria. So I'm Irish, but I live in Austria. So the main language that happens in the Culligan house is German. So my wife is Austrian. So everyone's speaking German. And I'm just shouting at people in English. I'm like, please just speak English to me. Please. You know, I thankfully also speak German. Yeah, no, I speak fluent German. I speak fluent German in the meantime. I've even done episodes of this in German. So this is, that was a big, that was a big deal for me. Let's do some webinars, presentations. So throw myself in the deep end. But it started not that well. When I moved here nearly 15 years ago, then we'll start. But I didn't speak any German, and I thought I could because I did one course. Then I blagged my way into an SDR role. So if you're familiar with an SDR, so sales development rep, junior, telesales, SDR role in German, which did not last, as you can imagine. I didn't find it charming. Trying to cold call with like, hello, do you speak English? Didn't work. So it didn't go well. But anyway, exactly. We digress. But hey, look, tell me a little bit about what you guys do over at Justuno. I took a look at the website and that, but I'm interested to hear from you.
Yeah, sounds good. So Justuno is the top conversion platform in the e-com space. So e-commerce, D2C, that world. We also do a lot of work with some media companies and some B2B, but I would say our ICP is for sure the e-commerce brands. So we help e-commerce brands convert more traffic into paying customer through personalization. So if you think of pop-ups that come up on the site and say, welcome back, we saw that you left this in your cart. Or for example, we saw you came to us from this website. This person on that website recommends this, check it out. So having that personalized messaging based on who you are, how often you've come to the site, if at all, what brought you to the website, having the very personalized messaging that now as consumers we've come to expect, just to make sure that creates a better customer experience on the website and ultimately converts at the end of the day.
Got it. Okay. Do you guys work with all shopware? Like so Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, etc.?
Exactly. And BigCommerce, all of those big platforms are our key partners for sure.
Excellent. Give me an example of a couple of customers if you can.
Oh yeah. Let me see off the top of my head. Cornbread Hemp is one. I should know this off the top of my head. I'm going to do a quick Googling.
That happens to me all the time. So people say, hey, tell me that. I'm like, I should definitely know. Yeah.
I know, right? The Vitamin Shop, Volcom, Trek Bikes, Peter Miller, basically a ton of e-com and fashion and a lot of CBD brands for some reason we do a lot of great work with.
Interesting. Okay, thanks for that. And I see, looking at your profile as well with the Women in B2B podcast. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Women in B2B Marketing is a right now bi-weekly show, and I'm hoping to move to weekly either this month or next. We'll see. It's a lot of work, as I'm sure you know. But basically, I listen to podcasts every day. I'm a huge podcast fan, and now yours is added to my list too, Andy. It's very good. But I was thinking one day, I was looking through my list of those that I follow and the shows I listen to regularly, and I realized that all of the hosts were men. And I was looking, now it started to just raise my attention, and I realized that most of the guests were men as well. So A, it got me pissed off. and then B, it made me just want to start something. I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let me just create something and see if there's any interest in it. So a show made by me, by a woman, and for women, and hopefully creating a comfortable space for women to come on board. Because the interesting thing for me in my career is that I found that I worked a lot more with women than men in marketing. And I think the stats are about 60-something% to 30-something or 40% men, leaning towards women in the marketing field. But on podcasts, it's largely skewed towards men. In general, all podcasts are, but in the marketing space as well. Very little data on this, but I did have one that I linked to in my show if anyone's interested. But so I started the show, and sure enough, I got a ton of responses that people are so excited to have more women on the show. So, and see more people that sound like themselves and have gone through experiences that they've gone through, and see themselves kind of reflected in what they're listening to. So far it's been great. And selfishly, I've learned a ton, and it's a lifeline in these crazy times, as we were chatting about before the mic came on. This economy and everything, all the crazy news that just keeps happening every year. This has been kind of a lifeline that gives me a lot of light.
It's also a nice passion project as well, right? That's
Exactly.
You're learning, you're having a bit of fun with it, and it's definitely interesting. What's the thing you find the toughest about it?
The toughest? Finding the time. And also I've knocked on wood, I've had a ton of people come to me to be on the show, so I haven't had trouble booking guests yet. But I've had trouble just finding time to meet with them all, because I do work full time, and I do some consulting on the side, and I'm a mom of a toddler. So it's hard to carve out the time to do it, but it makes me so happy and brings me such joy that I make it happen. So yeah, the time has been the hardest part, but thank God for Fiverr and PodSqueeze AI technology that helps it happen.
For sure. Getting that stuff cut together afterwards is like the thing that's probably most timely, but if you can hand that over to somebody, that's a gift, right?
Yeah.
It's good that you got people reaching out to you as well about appearing, because that's one of the things that's not that easy. It depends, right? So the Women in B2B Marketing, I think, is like a nice topic to do, and like ground that hasn't been covered that well, as you probably noticed. So it's something that's interesting to people. It's also not coming from a company per se, it's coming from you.
I think that makes a big difference. It does.
Yeah.
Since it's my own project, I don't right now even have any sponsors, so there's no brought to you by XYZ, which I think sometimes it causes a little friction for listeners, but we'll see.
Yeah. I think it causes friction for listeners, but also people that you're trying to get on. If you're trying to get some interesting people on, it's like, that's always what I found is the hardest about podcasts, or if you're trying to do webinars as a marketer, whatever it might be, is like it's almost like trying to sell. Trying to get people on, if you don't have incoming like you do, if you're pure going outbound, you need to try to sell it, and you need to be like, okay, like we got X amount of listeners, we're going to be able to share this with whoever. And starting out, that's super tough. So I'm really glad for you that you're managing to get people into the door without even pushing yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah. You know what actually was the big catalyst for that is I posted on LinkedIn LinkedIn is just the best, right? For B2B. I posted a LinkedIn that was kind of a call for speakers one time a couple of months ago. And it was by far my most popular LinkedIn post in history because I got so many comments of people recommending their friends, their peers, people that they would love to have on the show. And that caused a ton of those folks to reach out to me. And then I did contact them saying that that person was recommended or recommended them. So that has been feed that continues to feed me. So that one post has been really, really helpful.
That's awesome. So you went viral. That's awesome.
Yeah. In my world, I mean, even 50 comments is viral for me right now.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I went viral once and it didn't help me whatsoever. I wrote I've been posting like almost daily on LinkedIn for years. And the one thing that actually caught up a lot of steam was something that has nothing to do with anything that I offer whatsoever. It was like, I made it, I got pissed off at Slack. I guess you know Slack, right?
Yeah.
I got pissed off with LinkedIn and Slack, right? So Slack allows you to like give an emoji, like a high five emoji for like comments, right? Or for anything that somebody sent. And I was like, LinkedIn, I didn't get pissed off at Slack, I got pissed off with LinkedIn because I was switching between both. And I was seeing like, I just tagged LinkedIn. I said, hey, could you maybe like also have this like high five emoji thing, please? Slack has like changed the way that we think and I need you to do it. And I posted like after a couple of beers on a Friday evening. Seriously, not even like I woke up the next day and it was like 1,200 likes and I don't know how many comments. I was like, for something that like got nothing to do with it. It was just me telling people what grinds my gears, you know.
That's how see LinkedIn should have taken that as it must be a great idea. And sadly, I still don't see the high five reaction from them.
No, they didn't listen to me. They should tag them in this podcast and let them know again.
We should.
But hey, so actually just back to your podcast, because we were talking about this just beforehand. So both running podcasts, right? And one of the things that we had observed and something that you would have, like, without having exact data from your side, I have a bit more data than you do, but interesting nevertheless, in that female guests, so touching on the female piece plus the podcast piece, we've seen here with this podcast that since we've brought more female guests on, actually, the listenership has almost tripled actually per episode in comparison to tripled. Yeah, exactly.
Huge.
Exactly. So we're seeing a lot more traction with female guests, which is super interesting. Now, obviously, you don't have any male guests to compare to on your podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
But how are you finding listenership and so on at the minute? Are you seeing it? Nice steady increase?
Yeah, definitely. The increase has been great. I also think when I switch to a weekly podcast, that'll make a big jump. But first of all, kudos to you for seeing these stats and paying attention to them and for even testing that out to begin with and bringing more women on your show. So that's amazing. And all other podcast hosts that are hearing this, bring more women on because the stats show that it's a good move to make. But yeah, you and I were chatting. I do need to get the data for this. If I find it, I'll send it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But I did hear a stat years ago that if you sent an email coming from marketing, you send an email, it was from a woman's name and from a man's name, clearly identifiable as such, the open rate was much higher coming from the female than from the male. So I've also read that similarly, if there is a voiceover that is female or identified as female, then the watch rate is much higher than if it's a male voiceover. So these stats might have something to do with the information that you're saying, or if having more female guests. I wonder, I don't know the science behind that though. I'd love to dive into it, the psychology.
Super interesting. It's like behavioral science in terms of how people, I would imagine I'm completely speculating without knowing at all, but people find women more empathetic than men, I think, generally, and warmer and more open, and I think that probably plays a big role. And that I guess that plays a bigger role. Now, that's me, not a clue, right? So I'm like, I have no idea if that's the case, but that would be my guess, right?
Yeah.
But super interesting.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get some stats to back this up and link to, because that's fascinating to me.
For sure, for sure. Tell me, hey, just focusing on your role at Justuno, and we were also speaking like, or just as a marketer, right? We were talking about how the current climate, just before the call, we were talking about how the current climate is making things rather tricky for everyone, right? US, Europe, actually globally, right? So we've got things like a war happening in Europe, which makes things a little bit more challenging, which rising inflation rates, which then puts more pressure on the economy from a cost of doing business, plus cost of hiring people, everything, costs have just gone up across the board. US as well, we're seeing a lot of problems in the tech space. We're seeing jobs being lost everywhere, mainly due to a massive boom during COVID or just after COVID, and that boom has slowed down a little bit. Tell me, like, what from I've plenty of challenges as a marketer at the moment, but I'd be interested to hear from you. So, like, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with your team from a marketing standpoint?
Oof. Who's not having challenges right now? It's just insane. But what I'm seeing at Justuno and what I'm seeing in the communities that I'm into, so my peers at other tech companies in the B2B space, is that inbound has dried up, at least a portion of it. Demand gen is really difficult right now, or at least the lead gen side of it. And a lot of things our efforts are shifting back to outbound approach. So it's interesting that shift has happened. It seems like there's cycles in marketing, right? Because there's this whole self-reported attribution that also came full circle, right? When we first started out marketing, that was all we knew of as attribution, was that extra text box, right? That said, how did you hear about us? And then, of course, as soon as real attribution and automated attribution came into play, that went away. And we followed all of the pixels. And now all of a sudden, this is back and rebranded as self-reported attribution. This just extra text box on your field. So it's interesting. And I kind of feel like that's happening with demand gen as well, where inbound had its very long heyday. And now it's kind of going back to outbound. We're doing a lot more outbound efforts because it's just budgets are tight right now. So our ICP and many companies' ICPs are just holding their purse strings tight. So we have to do what we have to do. I know on my side, one thing that has remained tried and true, it's still impacted like everything else, but it's still a working channel, is all of our partner efforts. So I will die on that hill, as they say, of partner marketing and partnerships as being just a link to getting through these hard times. And in good times too, it just expands your reach and gets you in front of new audiences, showing how it matches with an existing tech that they're already using. So that's been huge for me.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree with you on the partnership front. I'm actually seeing that actually in the e-commerce space. So I also work with some other companies that focus on e-commerce, and the partner channel is the channel that's working the best. The issue with the partner channel is it takes time to build, right? You're not going to see overnight success, and it's also you need to build the relationships with the partners. You then need to enable the partners correctly in order to make sure that they know exactly all of your USP. They also then need to be able to sell your product in some cases if there's a reseller partner, right? They then also need to understand how your technology might work well with their technology. Their sellers need to know that information. It's like, it's a long, hard grind to get there, and you need to have like a pretty well-oiled machine. But once you do all that hard work, and that typically takes a year, 18 months, 2 years maybe to get there. It's not an overnight success, right? It's not like sprinkle a bit of money on it like you might have done back in the day with inbound. Sprinkle some money on lead gen on LinkedIn, and then you start to see leads come in and somebody starts following up with those leads or whatever. But yeah, I agree with you there. I agree with you there on the partner piece.
I think how I'm starting to see it lately, and this is not a fully fleshed out thought, but it's becoming more clear in the past few days to me, is that it's a two-part partnership, ironically, right, between sales and marketing. So it's partnerships, which I see as mostly sales run, and then there's partner marketing run. And the partner marketing side can help more instantly. I hate to use that word, but a lot faster, because you can get that tofu running, the top of funnel, some contacts and hopefully MQLs brought into your system, while the partnerships team is building out the integrations and the enablement and more of that bottom funnel activation, right? So it's kind of two parts to me that I see on the pipeline.
Sure. Makes sense. Makes sense. And I think you also touched on something there around attribution as well. All of that, like attribution you just mentioned, like black box attribution, the attribution software where people spend multi-thousands implementing, I'm not going to mention any names, but like multi-touch attribution and blah, like I never used any of that, to be honest. Like, first off, because I could never afford it. I was never in the luxurious position of being like, I'm going to spend an extra $100,000 this year on something that's going to tell me that I could probably dig into something a little bit more and figure it out myself, right? Especially if you're talking about larger deal sizes. And I think the days are gone of like, oh, which white paper has brought in enough deals? Like if you're talking about $100,000 deals, a white paper isn't the only thing, or an ebook is not the only thing that's going to get somebody to actually do to actually make the action of opening up an opportunity. So it is quite a bit in there. But if you have a general, my view on it is have one touch if you want, but try to have some form of general overview of like what's driving the right people from the right companies, and do more of that, right? Use common sense. That's like, use common sense. Like if something's not bringing anything, or if it's bringing just shit, leave it, right? That's exactly.
And it really does come back to asking the customer, just like that box that we used 20 years ago for marketing. How did you find us? Because whatever they say in that moment, it's harder when you look back historically, because they're not going to remember really. But in that moment of them coming to your site, they'll remember and hopefully share what brought them there. So even if it was 5 different things, what's most important is what's in their mind, right? That was that final step that got them to raise their hand. So it's interesting how it comes full circle.
So you heard it from here, guys. That box that you need to be putting on forms and you need to be asking your customers. This goes back down to a lot of things that we've been speaking about. Speak with your customers, or speak with your prospect to understand where they're coming from, understand what's important to them, understand what their pain points are. But that, for example, is a very simple fix to the attribution problem. And the attribution problem is never going to be solved. It's always going to be a pain in the bum. It will always be, right? And you're never going to have a perfect model. Never going to have a perfect model. It's always going to be, somebody's always going to be pissed off with it. That's always the way it is. But at least it gives you a little bit of a pointer in the right direction. May not be pointing a finger, it might be pointing an elbow, but it's
an indicator.
An indicator. Exactly. And on that note, we've come at time. And Jane, I just want to say thank you so much. Where can people find you, and where can people find the B2B market, the Women in B2B Marketing podcast?
Yeah, 2 places really. One, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Jane Serra. You'll look me up. I don't think there's too many of us out there. And then womeninb2bmarketing.com, or on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast. Search it. I made it very easy to find, SEO'd title, very clear what it is. So I'm sure you'll find it on your platform.
Perfect. Jane, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
And thank you, guys,
Same.
Sure. Hey, guys, this has been another episode of This is Your Captain Speaking. We'll be right back at you next week with more content. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.